Imagine standing directly at the exact epicenter of your own life's greatest tragedy, witnessing it unfold and feeling absolutely nothing. A young man named Remo stands beneath a tree on a quiet suburban street. His eyes are bright, scanning the neighborhood for the woman who confessed her love to him. He doesn't notice the wailing ambulance or the grieving crowd gathering a few feet away. He is looking for a romantic reunion in the middle of a funeral, but he has no idea that the person he is so desperately searching for is currently being moved inside that wooden coffin. Remo is an uncomprehending witness. The tragedy that will define his life is playing out 10 feet away, but because he lacks a single piece of context, his mind dismisses the scene as a generic neighborhood event. To understand this blind spot, we have to look back a year at the baseline of their relationship. In college, Remo was the control variable, quiet, highly studious, and entirely detached from campus social dynamics. Then there was Sony, the class monitor. She was highly capable, but harbored a sharp resentment every time a professor praised Remo's effortless academic success. Instead of ever confronting him, Sony engineered a physical distance. Whenever Remo walked into a room or joined a study group, Sony quietly packed her things and left the area. Remo noticed none of this. He perceived no rivalry or any secret grudge. To him, Sony was just a neutral element in his daily routine. For 12 months, their dynamic operated in a total vacuum. They built a relationship defined entirely by silence, leaving Remo with an informational deficit that would later prove catastrophic. The disruption to this pattern arrives on farewell day. This represents the absolute last time their daily lives will ever intersect. Remo was walking out with his friends when the year-long behavioral pattern shatters. Sony actively seeks him out, stops him, and pulls him away from the group. She reveals that over the course of the year, her silent hatred had inverted into love. She promises to wait for him, regardless of whether he ever returns the sentiment. That single conversation rewrites Remo's psychology. A year of total indifference is wiped out in seconds, replaced by an intense, all-consuming focus on Sony. The silence was finally broken, but the confession arrived at the precise mathematical second their physical proximity dropped to zero. Remo instantly transitions from a passive student into an active seeker. He spends his days riding his bicycle in wide circles around her general neighborhood, hoping for a random encounter. Eventually, he secures Sony's exact address from a mutual friend, narrowing his search radius down to a single street. But the friend also hands him a critical warning. A young girl in that specific neighborhood had died in an accident earlier that morning. Because Remo is flooded with the euphoria of new love, he experiences extreme confirmation bias. He discards the news of the fatal accident as a tragic coincidence that has nothing to do with his mission. He pedals toward the colony. His mind is occupied by one projected outcome: Sony running out of her house, smiling, ready to start life together. His focus on the reunion was so absolute that it paralyzed his ability to process the disaster occurring in front of him. He was physically moving toward a crash site while expecting a romance. Which brings us back to the tree. Remo arrives at the address right as the ambulance sirens wail to a stop outside the house. He watches the crowd gather and the coffin slide out of the rear doors. Objective reality is right in front of him, yet he never connects the data points to Sony. Eventually, the crowd thins. Remo concludes that Sony simply wasn't home today. He turns his bike around and pedals away, feeling a mild disappointment rather than devastation. Because he lacked the one piece of data linking Sony to the accident, he remained an uncomprehending witness to his own heartbreak. 5 days later, Remo runs into the mutual friend and complains about the wrong address. The friend clarifies the address was correct. The girl who died that morning was Sony. Let's look at the timeline. The confession and the accident collide, creating a zero-margin gap for a response. The timeline dissolves into 2 circles: love experienced and right to mourn. Because he never responded, there is zero overlap. As the realization sets in, Remo connects the wooden box he stood beside for hours with the girl who promised to wait for him. He holds no public title as a partner. He cannot mourn openly, yet he has lost his entire future. The physical accident claimed Sonny's life. The silence that preceded it is what trapped Remo in an unresolvable void. Time is an unpredictable variable. When an emotional truth exists, it has to be communicated immediately, because the window for a response can close without warning.